أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العظيم Tester Ya Sayyidi, Tester Medet Ya Sultan Medet. We ask for support, we ask for connection and divine presence. Medet Ya Sultan. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Subhanallah, Sultanallah, Nabi Muhammad alayhi salam. Subhanallah, Sultanallah, Nabi Muhammad alayhi salam. Subhanallah, Sultanallah, Nabi Muhammad alayhi salam. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome to the second class. Just a point clarification. My eyes are a mess today. I've been going through boxes and packing, and we're trying to make a move to Virginia now. So I'm suffering a little bit from allergies and puffy eyes and coughing. So if I cough and, sound terrible and look terrible, it's because I'm suffering a bit from allergies today. So we'll try to power through that. Also, a warning to the wise, sensitive Muslims should probably skip this class because we're going to beat up the Muslims today. Not with malice in our hearts, but, hopefully with a good intention of trying to shed some light on the many problems that exist within the Muslim Ummah, the community, and the ignorance that is a driving force behind a lot of the things that are going on, and the causes for why the Muslims are experiencing so many problems globally right now. It's because we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said that we would experience a second age of ignorance, and we're in that age of ignorance now, and we're asking and waiting along with our Christian brothers and sisters for Isa, Jesus, to return and try to sort these things out, and he will sort these things out. So that's the good news. The bad news is that we're in the muck right now, and we are suffering tremendously from people claiming all sorts of things that are falsely representing the Islamic faith and the religion. And more specifically, and of course more appropriately to this class, it's misrepresentations about Hijama, and which is why we're offering this course. So taking a look at what our Jewish brothers and sisters are doing, and the respect and reverence that they're still paying a lot of their customs and traditions, juxtaposed on top of what the Muslims are doing now, and the lack of respect and attention that they're giving to their own faith tradition. It's a good comparative analysis to take a look at that, and that's part of what we're going to be doing today, is taking a good look at some of the Jewish faith customs and practices, namely the mohil, the person who exercises the circumcision for babies, which is of course an Abrahamic custom and a covenant with God for the Jewish people, as well as the Muslim people and the Christians. Most of them are still doing it as well. But the Jewish faith, still holds it in much higher reverence than either the Christians or the Muslims do right now. And the requirements of a mohil, the mohil being the person who actually performs the circumcision, being, of a God-fearing manner, and somebody who's an Orthodox Jew, and somebody who understands the Jewish scripture very well, and not just simply a surgeon, because it is a surgical procedure that, can be done, but it is recommended very highly, and it's actually even said that it's not accepted if it's not performed by somebody who's religiously trained, and those people are religiously trained through rabbis who have been religiously trained, and it's handed down from generation to generation to generation, and they're real sticklers about who gets to do this procedure. Not anybody can just pick up and claim that they're going to be a mohel and start doing circumcisions. So there's a huge amount of information and stuff, and the respect that they have for the people that are doing this, and the way they protect the industry, if you want to call it an industry, around the process of the circumcision. It just involves a high level of respect and a high level of reverence, which the Hijama field is sorely lacking and should absolutely possess, even to a higher standard than that. So we'll get, a little bit into the Ijaza process and Isnad, which will probably be the next class. It's a big topic, a huge topic, a bigger topic than I'm able to handle really, but we'll touch upon it. And we want to first explore how we got to this place with Hijama. I think in the first class I mentioned that I went to Damascus, invited to go to an Imam and Khatib program in Abu Nur University, and discovered that the university system is not the way to learn Islamic knowledge. It is absolutely not the correct way, and it is similar to the method that the Sahaba, and the companions of Prophet Jesus experienced, where they were with their teacher and they had developed this heart connection. So they were actually, with their teacher 24 hours, 7 days a week, because they felt his presence and his hand and, what was happening with their lives. So it was a living, classroom. It was a living environment. The difficulties and problems that they encountered in their life was training for them. It wasn't, go to class and memorize, this and take a test on that. And then if you, have enough of an intellect to be able to get past the academics, you get a certificate and suddenly, you're somebody who's full of wisdom and full of knowledge. It doesn't work that way. You have to sit with a teacher, and that teacher decides, when you're ready. So it could take you 25 years before you are, sent out to do any kind of work at all, or it could be happening within 6 months. It could happen overnight for that matter. Each person is different, and it's for the teacher to decide. So we're getting a little bit into the Ijaza process that, I said that we would be handling next class, but it's important to kind of mix all this stuff together. So, I was invited to that program in Damascus, and I ended up finding a teacher that was more like the traditional teaching. Then I went up and I sat with him, and he would give lectures, and you would just sit at his feet, and you would have a heart-to-heart connection with him. And it's often said that the speaking, the teaching, is actually just to keep you busy while he's working on your heart. And this is profoundly true. And you become more, in tune with that and more aware of that as time goes on. But in the beginning, you're sitting there and you're being, as respectful as you possibly can, and you sit and, listen to the lectures. And the lectures themselves are just, profound and just incredible. You're hearing knowledge that you never heard from anywhere else. And it's so matter of fact that, there's no ego attached to this knowledge whatsoever. There's no, there's no wanting credit. There's no wanting payment. There's no, it's exactly as you would expect, the Sahaba, which are the companions of the Prophet, or the companions of Jesus, what they would have experienced. I can't imagine a prophet asking for money or payment or tuition, to come to his class, even though I'm charging you for this class, but we're just weeding you out. Once you get up to a certain level, we're not going to charge you. But the process is identical to what could imagine that you would experience if you're sitting literally at the feet of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or Isa, Jesus, or Moses, or Abraham, or any of them. So it's a living teaching. It's a heart-to-heart teaching. It's a teaching that comes alive. So you'll hear something, being said, and then you'll witness it coming to life in your daily activities or your weekly activities. Sometimes a month later, you'll suddenly, experience something that clearly relates back to the teaching that was given to you. So it's profoundly spiritual and profoundly enlightening, and it's so much deeper and so much richer than anything you could possibly get out of a book. So that is the methodology of teaching that I was exposed to in Damascus. And Damascus is a hotbed for that kind of teaching. It's a concentration of awliya and saints that do go there, and they're present. So, a lot of students from around the world, they flock to Abu Nur to learn about Islam and try to get their degree, and then come home and, be a big sheikh and beat people over their head with their certificates. And this is not the methodology, and this is not what transforms somebody into a human being. It is, just an institution that is selling you a degree. And it doesn't mean that when you get that degree that you're any different than when you first signed up for it. One of my teachers that I sat with stated that the university degree system is only good that if you're finished with that university system and you finally understand that you've learned absolutely nothing, then you've learned something. So going through it to discover, that it doesn't work is probably the best lesson of all. So I, can go on for hours about that whole system. But fortunately, and this is where I'm arriving at this story and the purposes for this class, is that this particular group of people were solely pretty much responsible for reviving the Sunnah of Hijama and protecting it. Not only reviving it, but protecting it, because one family after another had been preserving it. It was pretty much all from this one group. And they, there were other people that were doing it, but it was pretty much forgotten and it wasn't being used anymore. And they kept it alive. And I was incredibly fortunate to be able to, study under those people and learn, first by, going and attending one of these huge, Hijama sessions, which was taking place in like an Arabic, old Arabic, the open court, kind of house. And people would just funnel in there. He would give a time and a date, and the people would, know where to go. And early in the morning, starting at 7 o'clock in the morning, people would just start coming. And literally 2, 3, sometimes 400 people, early in the morning coming in. So it was impossible for him to do it. So he would be training people, and he would literally line people up in seats. And you'd have assistants in front of them in case they, passed out or had trouble. So it wasn't in a lying down position, because it is actually important if they can, sit up. Then you understand when they're starting to get dizzy. That's the first indication that the cup should come off. And if somebody's laying down in the position on top of a, kind of a massage table, you have no idea if they've passed out. So it can be a bit more dangerous if you don't get that indication early. And, it could be an indication of blood clotting or something like that. So you want to remove the cups very quickly and address that problem as quickly as you possibly can. And usually, removing the cups very quickly, and sometimes raising the legs, and, then you could let the person lay down, because they're pretty much usually passed out on the floor, which is why it's critically important to have people in front of them to catch them and to assist them, down on the ground if they're actually going to faint. So, hundreds of people would show up, and this guy would do it absolutely for free. There would be no charge whatsoever. And, the smart people, the good people, the people wanted more benefit from this, this gift. Understood that the charity that they gave would actually activate the healing process and help the healing process. And the smart ones would make a contribution on their way out. So it's not like he didn't get anything for his trouble, but he didn't demand payment for anything. And that is something we'll cover in the Jewish faith group. That's something similar they do with these mohels, that they don't demand payment. And it's, a stark contrast to what is happening in the Muslim world today, with people just running after money and charging these huge amounts of money for, hijama, and not being experienced and not knowing what they're doing, but still, demanding these huge payments. So we attempted to do that, and it's extremely difficult in the West to, have people understand that you're supposed to make a contribution. So I am not entirely down on charging somebody for the hijama, because there are supplies, and you do have to pay for an office, and usually, not always. I mean, you can do it anywhere, but standards are up to a certain point in America that people have their expectations, and a lot of the healing comes with the expectations, which is what the placebo effect is all about. So maintaining some of those expectations is important. So I'm, split on the money issue. I wish it was easy to just offer services and people, made good sense. And we started out that way. We tried to do it that way. And I had one person, contribute $1,000 one time just as a donation. So it does happen, and the people do come. The thought behind that is that you really shouldn't be doing it if people aren't, inclined or, inspired to give you money, that, it's probably not something you should be doing, because then they don't deserve it, So there's a whole synergy kind of, thing that goes on with this, that you shouldn't be forcing your services on people that don't appreciate them or don't want them. So I'll get into that a little bit more in other classes, but suffice it to say that these, amazing people that were in Damascus that I was exposed to, they literally are, the ones that were, responsible for keeping the Sunnah alive, and then for reviving it as well, and in part by teaching me, because I was able to go out and be the first one to put it on the internet. And, I had quite a bit of web design experience before going to Damascus, and we have lots of camera footage and stuff, which is all packed away in this woman's house in Damascus, and I'll probably never see a lot of that footage again, unfortunately. Otherwise, I'd be showing you pictures of these people funneling in and, getting taken care of by this person, because it was just an amazing thing to see. So, our prayers and, thanks should go to these people in Damascus that really are responsible. And now people are saying, well, my father used to do it, and, we've done it for years, and it's true. I mean, there's a long history, and, people can point to some history in their own families and other parts of the world and whatnot, but they pretty much left it, and until it became popular again, they didn't revive it. And then when it became profitable, and it became popular, and, got back on the radar, then people started, making all sorts of claims that they've been doing it for years and years and years. Maybe that's true, maybe that's not. From what I experienced and what I understood, it was, predominantly these people in Damascus keeping it alive. And then it was, their efforts that were imparted to me that was able to get the, hijama exposed to early on the internet. And then I can give you a list of people that are practicing today, that had called me up and spent hours on the telephone, questioning me and asking me different things after they saw it on the internet. They wanted to, of course, start a clinic and make a practice for themselves and become somebody who, was important in the community. And that was something I was happy to do, to convey and teach the proper procedures, and try to teach people what needed to be done and what needed not to be done. And I wasn't really teaching them, and I didn't make an effort to teach people, but I did want to share the knowledge that I had and answer any questions that people might have. So I spent a huge amount of time on the phone with people, and I could tell you who those people are now. They've gone on to make all sorts of fantastic claims about their practices and what they're doing, and they never heeded the warning about not making this a business. They never heeded the warning about having to go through a proper training program and be vetted by somebody who is authorized to give them permission. And it wasn't until many years later that I was actually given permission to give ijazas to people. So I had permission pretty much to practice it myself, but not to be a teacher. So I didn't set up any courses or any training for people, on a formal basis, because I didn't have permission. And you can't do something until you have permission. So the entire process over many years was me just offering hijama services to the people that heard about it and came and were interested in what I had to offer. And then later, I was given permission to be somebody who actually gave the ijaza, and that's fairly recent, and that's why these courses are now being offered to try to hopefully revive the sunnah, protect the sunnah, and to clear up a lot of the misconceptions. So that's kind of where we're at right now. But it's a long way of saying that there's a lot of misconceptions and problems that have filtered their way into this process because there is no respect for the teaching, and there's no respect for the sunnah, really. And because everybody has access to the internet and they can do searches and watch a bunch of videos and stuff, and because hijama is such an easy technical thing to actually master, especially with these new pump mechanisms, most of the people using the pumps because there's no fire involved, and the people like it because it pulls more blood, which is just absolutely incorrect. And then they also have no idea how to use the fire. They've never been trained to use the fire. So it's, pumps all the way. And as a result of it, everybody's an expert with these pumps. And they're, just giving bad information left and right about this stuff. And they do turn it into a business. And they're actually trying to unionize, everything now with the certificate process. And they're trying to make it more like an alternative, a medical procedure, such as acupuncture or something, where you have to, go to school and then be certified and have a license. And they're cheating the sanctity and the spiritual nature of this because it is a religious, practice. So what I'd like to talk about is the Jewish mohel, the practice of doing the circumcision. Today, any mohel, because, sometimes a woman will have to be, remaining in the hospital for several days. It's not such a normal occurrence now, but it used to be they kept women in the hospital for quite some time. And now they, try to get them out on their feet as quickly as possible. But there's still incidences where, women do have to stay in for whatever complications. And the babies are in the hospital. And it's a requirement, religious requirement, that it be performed, I think, on the 8th day. And it, there's a bunch of other, things that need to be considered. If it's on the Sabbath and you delay it one day, there's, you really need to know and understand what you're doing. But more importantly, you need to be vetted, and you have to be a God-fearing person who understands the Torah and the Jewish law, and you have to, be somebody who's been sanctioned by somebody who doesn't have an ego or a stake in what you're doing, and whose name is on the line because they've given you permission to do it, that it comes back on them if you do a bad job. So, these institutions that do it, they can kind of protect themselves behind the institution. And if something goes wrong, they fire one teacher and, put all the blame on them as a scapegoat and preserve the institution's name, and let go of the scapegoated individual. And in this way, they can continue their reputation, even though their practices, might be something kind of questionable. But with an individual, there's no, place to turn except the responsibility of the individual himself. So in this way, it's a much better system. That person is not going to sanction somebody to go out and do, damage or harm to his own reputation. And plus, it's, coming from a God-fearing person, so he wants to please God. So he's not going to just let somebody do it for money. So the best example we see in a lot of this is within the Jewish faith, and the reverence and the respect that the Jewish community gives to these mohels, and the reverence and the respect that the general community, including the medical community, gives to these mohels. Because as I was saying, sometimes complications, take place, and these women have to stay, in a hospital, and the mohel will go into the hospital, perform a surgical procedure on a new child, infant, and the doors are, flown wide open. They're welcome with open arms. They're able to do exactly what they do. Without any interference, without any question, and circumcision is something that is now receiving a lot of criticism, that it's, abusive to the child and it's unnecessary, and, this is a religious procedure that's been going on since the time of Abraham, and for anybody, to say that it's not something beneficial. We get the same thing in the Islamic faith with slaughtering, and I can tell you for sure that, slaughtering an animal in the manner that you are supposed to do it, not in the manner a lot of Muslims do it, but the manner you're supposed to do it, is by far the most humane way to slaughter an animal, and most beneficial way, and most healthy way, both for the human being and for the animal. And it is very much a spiritual process, it's spiritual exercise, and if you do it properly, you see and feel the spiritual benefits from that slaughter. It's not a gruesome, process. It's not something that you sacrifice for God. God doesn't need a lamb. It's a charity, and it's supposed to be given out to the community. And that charity has a power. It has a spiritual power, and a power to protect, and a power to heal. And you really need to understand these things. We also need a conduit, and a clean conduit, to be able to, participate in this process to make it work. So it, works to varying degrees depending on your level, I guess, of spirituality and your cleanliness and your ability to understand the religious nature of these things. So, the Jewish community, most of the rabbis agree that if you do it with a surgeon, it's not accepted. And then you have to repeat the process, with a qualified mohel, and they prick a little bit of blood, to re-perform it without, doing another complete procedure. So it's very kind of the child just to prick it a little bit and take a little blood out. And that suffices to correct, the wrong circumcision that was done. What's interesting is the Muslim community, I've never heard anything about circumcision. Of course, I haven't been exposed to it because I haven't had a newborn child myself. But as far as I know, it's just a process that the Muslims allow any surgeon, dirty, clean, atheist, believer, it doesn't matter. I think they just allow them to do it. And again, there's no reverence, there's no, respect. for the process, for the spiritual nature of it, the beauty of it, the godly, benefits, and it's just mind-boggling that it's not, as well preserved and understood within the Muslim community. So we're looking to the Jewish community for some of these answers, and you get them because they have preserved the integrity of the mohel. And these teachers, who teach these mohels are done thousands and thousands and thousands of these circumcisions, and are absolutely the most qualified people to be doing these circumcisions. And they follow, surgical procedures and sterile procedures, but they also understand deeply the religious components and the meaning behind, some of the ritualistic things that are done, some of the, passages that need to be read. And they understand that it's a spiritual process and that it is a godly covenant, they say, that must be performed by a mohel, a qualified mohel who is God-fearing and who is, Orthodox Jew. And, there's a lot of perhaps oddities, to the outsider, but, you have to allow people to practice their religion in the manner they want. And those oddities to one person, might be completely and fully understood by another as being important, both spiritually, physically, mentally, all of that. So we're going to take a look at that. There's, some videos on the actual classroom website that you can go to, and I, encourage you, and we'll actually take a look at one right now that gives you the 9 reasons why you should go to a mohel. So let's take a look at that now, and then I'll come back and maybe comment on that a little bit more. Okay.
What is a mohel and why should I use a mohel? Every bris milah must be performed by a properly trained and certified mohel. A mohel is formally trained both in circumcision techniques as well as in Jewish law and tradition. While he certainly must be an expert in the latest medically approved surgical and sterilization procedures, being a mohel requires much more than surgical and medical skills. Jewish law sees the moment of bris milah as having a great spiritual impact upon the child. The mohel, therefore, must be an expert in the way he performs this important mitzvah. Because if it is not done correctly, the removal of the negative energies is not properly accomplished. It is therefore important to choose an orthodox God-fearing mohel, in order to ensure that the bris is done to perfection. He must be a Sabbath-observant Jew, is personally a Shomer Torah mitzvot, who performs the bris milah in accordance with the intentions as well as the methods of Jewish law. In this way the mohel is a specialist in the spiritual aspects as well as the medical aspects of circumcision. A male mohel should perform the bris. The reason for this is that since the bris milah is to imprint the act of the covenant, it therefore must be performed by a member of the covenant. The way to rectify an invalid circumcision is to do hatofa's dam bris, releasing a speck of blood. It is important to stress that bris milah is a religious observance, and not a medical procedure. For this reason, one should not use a doctor to do the bris.
Okay, so hopefully you enjoyed that. I certainly did. It was something that really impressed me when I was doing the research for this. The mohels are, very well respected, and I liked especially the information about, this being a spiritual practice and it not being accepted by just a surgeon. So relating that back to Sorry, allergies again. Relating that back to the Hijama and what's going on in the Hijama field and what's going on in the greater cupping field is the cupping people are the surgeons, and they're performing cupping, and they're doing all sorts of things. They might technically be doing it correct, although there's many practices which they're not doing correct. Namely, they're not doing it on the proper days. In an emergency situation, I mean a true emergency, not something made up so you can get a little extra business. Which a lot of people unfortunately are, claiming all sorts of emergencies, and they're not emergencies. But an emergency situation, I mean, you can do it on any day, but the ideal and optimal day, which is the day you should certainly try to do this, are the lunar last 15 days of the lunar calendar and the odd days. So it would be the 17th, 19th, and 21st are the optimal days. I mean, you can get into the 23rd and 25th, of course, as well. But the specific saying of the Prophet said very specifically it was 17, 19, and 21st. And then there's, prohibition of not doing it on Wednesdays, and there's a prohibition to respect and honor the Jewish Sabbath, which is a Saturday, so you're not supposed to do it on Saturday. The Wednesday prohibition is because there's disease and illness that can occur on Wednesdays, and it's one of the few things that I, tried to figure out about Islam that I haven't received an answer on. Why that illness takes place on Wednesdays, I still haven't figured that out. When I find out, or if you find out, please let me know. But that's a question I still have outstanding. I would like an answer for. But, having been so convinced by everything else that I have been told, I have learned to listen. So I respect that Wednesday, tremendously. And even if I go to a doctor, I won't accept a shot or something on Wednesday. I had a surgery once, which is not something I recommend anytime, but it was necessary to have that. And they had me scheduled on Wednesday, and I told them absolutely not. And they said, well, the doctor only works on Wednesday. I said, absolutely not. I won't do it on Wednesday. And the hospital was kind enough to move their schedule, and the doctor actually moved his schedule around to my surgery, which is a huge, undertaking in a hospital to get everybody back on a different day. So I was real appreciative of that. But yeah, Wednesdays are out. You don't want to do Wednesdays. And, there's a bunch of other restrictions, which we won't go into detail right now about. But all to say that the cupping, that is occurring in the wider community within the physical therapy community and the massage therapy, the alternative medicine, acupuncture communities, they don't possess this knowledge. And if they do possess it, they don't respect it because they're trying to make money. And they don't want these restrictions because it focuses too much on those days. And then you have, office that's jam-packed with people on those days, and you can't give the individual attention that people have come to demand. So you're kind of relegated to doing what they did in Damascus and just lining people up and doing a bunch of, cupping with, the assistance of others, which is really, I find the best way to do it. But again, we're in the West, and there's a certain amount of expectation here, so it's a little bit different. I would love it to be, in a manner that is, closer to what we did in Damascus, and completely, all volunteer, and, not charging any money whatsoever, and expecting people to understand and still contribute. Because when you have these people in your community that are capable of doing these things and reviving these important practices, you should take care of those people as best you can. So it's something that is really dying within the Muslim community, the respect for the imams, the respect for like Quran teachers, the respect for Hijama people. It's just not there, and the abuses that are taking place are, enormous. All these mosques are, pretty much country clubs that are run by doctors and lawyers, and, they set up a board of directors and establish a democracy. and everybody gets a vote, and deciding on a popularity contest who's going to be the imam. And an imam can't function that way. That's not the way it works. So it must be the most pious and educated and religious and spiritual person, and they're taking counsel with these people, but they're not under their thumb and having to listen to them or be fired. So the whole Islamic system is upside down, especially in America, with all these Islamic centers. And since we're bashing the Muslims, I could honestly say, with my experience of living overseas for 8 years, that there's a huge amount of intelligence work that goes on overseas, and the way they reward the people is to promise them, an education, or promise them to set them up in a business, or give them citizenship. And unfortunately, those intelligent assets overseas are given these plum positions, and the Islamic society in America is littered with people that are being rewarded for their prior spying and their information gathering overseas, and that's how they get permission to come over here. Of course, that's not all people. Some people get to come over because they have favorable skills and whatnot, and others because of refugee status and whatnot. But that's a whole other topic. I can go into books and books and books of information about that. And I probably will write a book on that one day, about my experience overseas and what my experience has been within the Islamic communities here. But a lot of these Islamic centers are run by people who've been rewarded with citizenship and who are loyal to the intelligence agencies and still reporting to them. So it's probably caused quite a stir for me to say all that, but it's unfortunately very true. And the same goes, for a lot of the Muslim, public relations organizations and whatnot. And unfortunately, the same goes true with the American media right now. Most of the people that are working in the standard mainstream media today are assets for CIA propaganda. And it's the alternative news sources that you're getting most of the good information from nowadays. But you have to sort through all that because, of course, there is all sorts of crazy unproven theories that you have to wade through. And then part of the propaganda campaign is to throw even crazier stuff in there to make and discredit the people that are trying to get at the real news. So, again, a whole nother topic, but it does relate back to, what is happening in America and why the people who, are trying to do things properly don't get a voice, and why they don't get celebrated as the people who are best able to combat the radical Islam in the society today. That if you promoted those people, radical Islam would be dead overnight. But they don't promote that. They promote Saudi interests. They promote Wahhabi, control over these mosques. And as a result, the teaching predominantly in most of the mosques across this country is that I can read the Quran and the Hadith of Prophet Muhammad, and I can arrive in my own mind what that meant. And it is just the most absurd way of understanding things that you could possibly imagine, but it is absolutely what is prevalent in the Muslim world today. And it's a little bit like somebody saying that I can go online, I can read, some books and information and web pages, and I can watch a couple videos on how to fly an airplane, and I'll put on, the lapels and stuff, and I'll put on my captain's hat, and I'll go and get in the cockpit and announce to everybody that I'm going to fly the airplane because I'm qualified to do so, because I've done a self-study program and I'm set to give this a try. I don't think anybody would be on the plane if they heard that before they took off. So if you want to avoid that plane, you should also avoid the fake hijama practitioners making all sorts of claims by going on the internet and taking, these fake courses, most of which, not bragging, it's absolutely true, most of which, learned what they learned from me, but didn't listen to what I had to say, which was the underlining, you must be vetted, for good character and good moral, standards and spiritual acumen. And you can't just, assume that you're that person yourself, and you have a lot to learn and a lot to understand before you can go out and call yourself a practitioner. And not only do they go out and call themselves a practitioner, they go out and start, training courses, and they start teaching other people their foolishness. And it's really frightening, what's happened. But it was foretold that this is an age of ignorance, and we're certainly in that age of ignorance right now. And hopefully this video and course will help, dispel some of that and correct it. But most people are happy with that. So, we're only talking to a few people, but a few people is enough. If we can, guide a few people to what is correct and a better understanding, that's enough for us. So there's a bunch of additional information here today. You can go. I would encourage you to look at some more of these Mohill videos. Gives you a really good understanding of the level of respect that the families have, the gatherings, that they have. We have something similar with an akika that, after the baby's born, you're supposed to slaughter, 2 sheep for a male child and 1 sheep for a female child. That's not because males are better. It's just because the male of the family is, given more inheritance, and it all balances out in the long run. And there's more responsibility on the male member of the society for the charity and stuff that is given. So the woman actually, if she earns any money in a marriage, doesn't have to spend any of it. It's all her money to keep. It's the male who has to provide for the entire family. The female can contribute if she wants to, but she's absolutely not required to. So all these things balance out. It doesn't have anything to do with one sex being better than the other sex. It's absolutely absurd. We're completely different creatures and different creations, and we have unbelievable, gifts and talents, and we're wonderful, incredible individuals, with each of us having a secret of our own. So yeah, take a look at those videos, and I would encourage you to also kind of research a little bit on the internet and start looking at some of the absurd, claims and some of the absurd videos that you'll see relating to hijama, all the claims about, the different conditions that it cures and fixes, and people have no idea about that. And the real danger is that these people actually start believing that they're doctors. And when people come to you for, all these problems, they're in your hands, and you can really effectuate a lot of damage. Hijama, in the practice of hijama, should be limited to hijama and not much more. You can share with people your own experiences, and, you can tell them what you would do maybe in a situation, but you certainly should never, give advice or recommend to them what they should do. So it's a position of, great responsibility, and unless you've been vetted and properly trained, you have absolutely no business doing it. So I applaud our Jewish brothers and sisters for maintaining their level of respect and reverence for those who do the mohels, and I thank you for that example. It's an incredible example that I hope we can extract from and benefit from and learn for ourselves that this is something we as Muslims should be doing. And then maybe, we wouldn't be experiencing all this strife and difficulty that we're experiencing, because it's coming on the Muslim community for a reason. You have to admit that. So anyway, take a look at the stuff, and thanks again for showing up. We'll see you in classroom number 3, which is, I don't want to give dates and times. It'll be posted on the classroom, because we might be repeating this at different times afterwards. So, but you got, for this particular series, you have a little bit more time to get through the classroom material. And there is a bit of a homework assignment this time. So try to take a look at that and get that completed. Send me in, whatever you're going to send in. And we'll see you next class. Thanks. For the honor of the most honored and most gracious Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Fatiha. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah rabbil alamin arrahmanirrahim maliki yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in ihdinas siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladzina an'amta alaihim ghayril maghdubi alaihim waladdallin. Amin.